What's up, guys? It's your girl, Maccouture. Where am I? I think I'm at, is it the Grill? Tarunga Grill or Saratoga? I'm at downtown Disney, the place where you get the nice long beans and the chicken wings. And that's what I'm getting at 11 o'clock in the morning with the Dole Whip. Only good thing about being an adult is that you can eat what you want when you want to. It's the only good thing about being an adult. Everything else is whatever. I have a ton of intros to do, and I'm going to do them from right here because we have got to multitask. I have been gone for, I would say, what, 2 weeks now? A week? I know that I didn't post last week, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I need to get it together. So, let's go on ahead and do some intros right now. What's up, guys? It's your girl, Maccouture, coming to you from Trader Sam's at downtown Disney. I have been busy, and a little bit of it has been at Disneyland. And I needed to do some intros, and so we are going to have to do them on the go because this is where I am. I have the time to do it right now, so let's do this. I want to talk about economy binding. So economy binding is when you use basically the 3-yard quilt method to do your binding. So she has it all mapped into the quilt so that you can use the leftover fabric. And it's really a way of economizing your binding. So instead of doing a maybe 2-inch strip or a 2 1/4-inch strip, which is what I like to use, you can use a 1 1/4-inch strip. And you go on ahead and you fold it in half, and then you fold it again, and then you go on ahead and sew that down and then roll it over. And it does work. It gives you a very thin binding. I like it when I really want the quilt to match and I don't have enough fabric to do the full 2 1/4. With the 2 1/4, I get a cleaner look. There's something about the way that you pull it, and when you wrap it over, you can't shift it as much because it's folded. With this one, it can kind of get away from you, so you start to see kind of some waves and whatnot. But I do like economy binding when you just have just a little bit of fabric left and you want to go on ahead and bind your quilt. So it works. It's okay, but again, I get a cleaner bind using the way that I usually do my methods when I fold it in half and then fold it over. But in a pinch, economy binding works. When you're using a 3-yard quilt, when you're doing a 3-yard quilt, it works. But hey, I like it. It's fine. It does work, but it's not. And a lot of that is also the fact that I am always rushing. You guys know that I'm always rushing, so that's probably why it's not the cleanest either. I mean, it still works, but you guys get it. Economy binding, it works. Let me show you how to do it right now. Stay tuned. So this is the strips. These are the strips that are cut at 1 1/4 inches. And I am just taking off the selvage right now. Nothing, too special about that. We are just removing the selvage. See? Did you see that little slip there? Thank God that I always close my rotary cutter after I finish cutting. Like, you very seldom will ever see an open rotary cutter with me. When you're first starting to quilt, that's the first thing you should do is practice opening and closing your rotary cutter, because the minute that it comes off that mat, you need to close it so that you don't have any slip-ups, because they are incredibly sharp. So I am jumping between 4 different quilts with this binding method right now. That's just because of the way that I put these together. And don't be freaked out. You guys know that I sew at my mother's house, and she brings me food because I will never, ever, ever stop to eat, ever. And so she brought me my favorite See's Candy treat. That's a Chelsea over there, so don't think that it's anything other than what it is. And I will consume it at some point, but it's just sitting there right now. So I'm it's the same strips, it's just different colors. I mean, it's the same theory that we're doing right now. We're just chopping off all of the selvage right now. You can see it very clearly here with that white. You really don't want to have that in your quilts if you can avoid it. Every now and then I'll leave it on and try to catch it when I'm sewing, but it's best really to get rid of the selvages. So now I have put them right sides together, which means pretty sides touching, and I'm going to sew them together. When you are economy binding, you don't cross them and sew at the diagonal. That's how most people do their bindings. However, for economy binding, we're trying to economize. We don't have enough leftover fabric for that. We don't want to chance it. So you go on ahead and put the pretty sides together. That's what I'm doing right here. And I'm just sewing a straight seam With my guard here, it's a 1/4 inch, and I'm doing this on my straight stitch machine, who I named Io, and you can totally see the name so clearly right here. When I tell you I still love this machine, I do. I'm going to do an updated video on this machine very, very soon. So after you finish joining all the strips, you are going to press the seams open. This just reduces the bulk, and you do want to reduce the bulk as far as the binding is concerned. I used to be like, why does that matter? But you don't want those knots there. You'll see them, you'll feel them when you're sewing it down, so it's best just to go on ahead and open those up. So go down your entire thing. For these, I am doing, these are smaller throw size quilts, so I think I did 5 strips for all of the bindings. Now you're going to fold it in half and iron it down all the way through the entire strip. Fold it in half, iron it down all the way through the strip. After you've done that, you are going to open it up and you're going to fold one side into the center. And now I'm eating fruit ambrosia, which is another one of my favorite snacks ever. I love fruit ambrosia. I'm always snacking while I'm quilting. But again, just fold it to the center and down. I'm going to show you guys another angle of me doing this with a different color. So here you can see I'm on my ironing board. Don't judge my ironing board. Although it's burned up, it smells so good. It just smells of all the best press, guys. I mean, I have another cover for it. I have several covers for it, but I refuse to change it because it still works and it smells good. It doesn't look very pleasant. It doesn't look pretty, but you get what you get. You don't throw a fit. So this is, I'm showing you that I'm folding that to the center. And this is what I'm left with. I've got one side folded and one side that is not. And I'm going to line that up with the quilt. So this is the back of the quilt. I prefer to start on the back and fold to the front with the method that I use. If I were hand binding this, I would start on the front and fold to the back. But for machine sewing, I sew on the back of the quilt first. So you see that I'm not starting right at the end. You're going to leave a tail. And I like to leave a tail of about 7 to 12 inches. And I'm just nudging this all up to the edge, to that guard there, and we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. I love that guard. That guard makes my seams so accurate. Again, love this machine, love that it has that guard right there. I used to use a magnetic guard, but now I have that, and this works so much better. It is, you know, you have to change it out when you don't want it there. You have to unscrew it, but it's not that big of a deal. So I went forward and then went back a couple of stitches just to lock it, and now we are going to whiz around this quilt. And when I say whiz, I mean whiz around it, because this machine goes incredibly fast, and I sew fast with stuff like this. I put the pedal to the metal and I let this guy sail. So you can see the black line behind me. You can see what I'm sewing, and it's just a 1/4 inch. And we're just going to go, go, go. And right here, I'm just kind of showing you guys how I fix it to the, you know, to make sure the sides, do some adjusting here and there. And you can see that the folded edge is to the left. And so now we've gotten to the edge, and I stopped about a 1/4 inch before we get to the edge. So now I'm going to fold it up and then fold it down. And so you're going to get that nice miter. So I folded it up at like a 45-degree angle, and then you just pull it straight back down. And some people start a 1/4 inch, some people start right at the top. I don't know which way is the proper way, but I get a good miter on my corners, so I don't know that it really matters. It probably does, but thus far, I'm like, I don't know. It works for me. So I'm starting right at the edge, and I'm just going to sew straight down. And I'm going to back up a little bit, and then I'm going to take it right on and just whip around this other corner. And that is how I attach my binding to my quilts. And right now I don't know what we are focusing on, but nonetheless, we'll come back down here, and we are going, going, going. There we go. And we're just going to zip down. And do some adjusting. Boy, this color is so vibrant on the back of this quilt. I don't know if you could, when I took the pictures of the backs of these quilts, you couldn't really tell, like it looked like it was muddy, like they look like this. But under that light, you can really see how vibrant it is. So now I'm just cutting off some of the excess. I know that I'm not going to need that excess there, so I'm just cutting it. Now the other tail is longer. And I'm going to overlap these by just 1/4. A 1/4 overlap is all that we need. So we're definitely going to have some leftover binding, but not that much. Not enough for me to really want to save. So I can see, you see that I just tipped it up just a little bit so that I could see the other strip. And I'm going to make sure that the longer strip overlaps this strip by 1/4. I find that if you do any more than that, you have a bulky binding, and you don't want that. So I am marking it with the friction pen. These disappear with heat. Some people who live in colder climates have issues with that color coming back. I am in LA, and I haven't had that issue with the marking, but be careful with the friction pens just like you'd be careful with anything else. So I'm going to cut on that line which overlaps it by 1/4. So going ahead and cut right there. See how it's just a little bit overlapped. I wish that I had left more binding non-sewn so that I had a little bit more room to gather right here, but it was enough for me to be able to do the 1/4 inch seam. It wasn't too bad. So then you take that and you match right sides together. You open it up all the way, and you can put it under your sewing machine. Try to be careful here and make sure that it's still lined up, and then you're just going to sew another 1/4 inch seam. It wouldn't be horrible to backstitch here. It's not going to hurt anything. It'll probably enforce it just a little bit better, because you'll see that when I go around there was one that I didn't enforce and it kind of was open a little bit. Did I fix it? Of course not, but I saw it. I saw that it happened. So now when you open it up, it's nice and tight. Perfect. So you want to open up that seam just like you did the others. Just open it up a little bit. Flat. There we go. And finger press that. And now we're going to take it back to the sewing machine and sew down the rest of that binding. So I'm overlapping just a little bit, just a touch, and we're going to sew down. And that is how you attach the entire binding. There are some people who use the method of attaching it on a diagonal, which reduces even more bulk. And if you were entering it into a show, I'd probably say to attach it that way, but it's tricky. Trying to figure out which way to twist the fabric, it just, this is easier, and it's much faster, and you don't really have to think about it. You're just joining it. It makes sense. So now I am pulling it over and just training it to lay down, to lay flat. So this is the back of the quilt, and I'm just training it with a little bit of heat to lay flat. This is an additional step that you really don't have to do. I do it. I find that it makes it just look a little bit nicer. But again, this is an extra step. You don't have to do it, but I'm just pulling it taut, and that's that. So now here is how the binding all comes together. So you fold it over to the front. This is now the front of the quilt. And it's folded into the center. And now I'm just folding it over. And again, I'm going to hit it with some heat. You can use binder clips, not binder clips, well yeah, you can use binder clips or the Wonder clips to clip it down, and then you can hand sew it. Or it just kind of depends upon what your style is. So again, I'm training it, and this is what I mean when I say that it can get a little wavy. When I sew it together, after I've folded it in half, I don't get so much wavering. It's not possible, really, because both ends are locked. I don't know if that's making any sense to anybody who's new, but it just, you can kind of wiggle this. It's just not exact. It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect though, so whatever. But when you get to the corner, you see that this is open all the way up. You're going to fold it in half to the quilt, and then you're just going to roll it up, and bam, you've got that nice miter. I get nice miters. I really do. I'm always pleased. I'm mostly pleased, I should say, with the corners of my quilt. So now I'm going to train it again with this here. And if you saw before, I like to glue this down. So I put a little glue. It's just Elmer's washable school glue. It's a great basting glue for this. And then I hit it with the iron to freeze it in place. So that way it doesn't move before I take it to the sewing machine. Again, these are extra steps, but I find that the binding comes out pretty good when you do these extra steps. So I just go back with the glue, Elmer's glue in this little bottle, this little fine point bottle, and I glue it. And it's not a ton of glue. You can see that not a ton of glue is coming out. It's just a little bit. And I stay behind that 1/4 inch seam. And I just drop a little beads of glue all the way down. And then I take that iron and I freeze it in place. And then I feel comfortable when I take it over to my sewing machine, which is what I'm about to do now. So freeze it in place. I love this binding on this particular quilt. It might have been out of that series that I did. This might have been my favorite binding. It was my favorite binding out of the series. So now I'm showing you I am changing the color of my thread on the top, and for this particular quilt I'm doing the same color on the bottom in the bobbin. Sometimes I do different top and bottom colors depending upon what I think is going to show. Now something I will say about this binding, which is really interesting, is that the binding stitching on the front happens in the same place that it does on the back. I'll show you an example. Usually when I use a 2 1/4 inch strip, the binding stitching is on the quilt, on the back, and then on the front it's on the actual binding. I'll show you guys in a second what I'm talking about. So I have changed my foot. I have threaded the machine. This is obviously a different quilt, but that light is so bright on that white you can't really see. You get a little bit more contrast. This is a blind hem foot, and it is the best thing smoking when it comes to adding binding by machine. I don't have this foot on my straight stitch because you can't move the needle right or left, and for this you want to be able to move the needle right or left. However, look at that. You see where the stitching ends right here? And then look on the back where the stitching is going to be. You're going to see that it hits the binding in the same place. It's super clean in that sense. Now usually on the back that stitching would be on the quilt, and so I'd have to match the binding to the quilt, not the binding itself. Hope that makes sense, guys. This is the cleanest look in that sense. So now I'm going to show you guys what these quilts look like with the binding. This is my least favorite binding, which was the purple binding. This was a nice, pretty black one, super thin, just enough to frame it. If you guys want to see these quilts, please check out the series. Oh, I love the way the binding looks on this guy. Oh! Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you guys later. Here are a couple of suggested videos. Bye-bye.